The Home Secretary referred earlier to immigrants coming here to live off the taxpayer. Can I put it to her? Not only do a disproportionate number of immigrants find themselves in work, whether it's legal work or illegal work, but the children of immigrants do pay tax, and she should remember that.
I do say to the Honourable Lady, for whom I have the greatest respect, it isn't as if I'm about to forget my own background, so I don't really need other people to remind me of my own history or background in my own country. And what I would also say to her is we are talking about people smugglers and men, women and children, though these days primarily young men, getting on small boats in the Channel and crossing into this country. They are not arriving in a safe and legal way. They are not migrants as we understand them in the usual sense. We wish to pivot to a system where in the future this country will live up to its responsibilities to help those in need across the world and fulfil our international obligations by taking people through safe and legal routes where we will be able to increase the numbers that we take on those routes. It will be subject to debate in this Parliament to make sure we're playing our full part, but doing so in a controlled way and one that does not put tens of thousands of pounds per person in the hands of people smugglers. She knows that is the trade we are trying to break. We have been going after the gang masters, and now we must make legal changes to make sure that we change the calculus of those who are seeking to get on a boat in the north of France.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to move the reasoned amendment standing in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, myself and my honourable and right honourable colleagues, declining to give a second reading to the bill on the grounds it does not go far enough to combat illegal immigration or to ensure that all foreign criminals are deported. Firstly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can't help but notice the absence of the member for Dover, the Immigration Minister, who I was expecting to see in his place. Perhaps the Home Secretary has not yet forgiven him for openly defying her a few weeks ago and her rather extraordinary public campaign to get him fired. No wonder she has so much trouble deporting illegal immigrants when she can't even deport her own junior minister from Marsham Street. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, well, does the Home Secretary deny that she tried to get him fired a couple of weeks ago, unsuccessfully? I notice she makes no such denial. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the beginning of her speech, the Home Secretary made a number of claims about statistics, one or two of which I would like to very gently take issue with. She referred to small boat crossings. Since the election, 76,000 people have dangerously and illegally crossed the Channel by small boat. That is more than under any other Prime Minister. And let us keep in mind, those crossings were undertaken mainly by young men, all of whom were leaving a safe country, France. Nobody needs to flee danger in France. She also referred to removal numbers. Of course, about 85% of those removals are voluntary, and only a tiny fraction of those removals relate to people who arrived by small boat. In fact, since the election, removals of people illegally entering by small boat amount to only about 5%, 5 or 7% of small boat arrivals. So if you enter this country by small boat and you have a 95% chance of staying and you get put up in taxpayer-funded accommodation, no wonder the crossings have occurred in record numbers. The only way of deterring these crossings is if almost everybody arriving gets deported when they arrive. Let me also observe that of the 80,000 people whose asylum claims were rejected at first instance last year, 2025, only 12,000 were removed or left. And when it comes to foreign national offenders, yes, it is true that FNO removals are somewhat up, which I welcome. But if you look at the breakdown by nationality, it tells a rather different story. Numbers of foreign criminals who are deported to countries like Albania, Romania, Lithuania, Poland, those numbers are quite strong, quite high, when you compare them against the offender population. But when you look at countries outside of Europe, the numbers are very, very much lower. So, for example, Jamaica, Iraq, Nigeria and Somalia together have 1,150 offenders in prison. And yet last year, and many more out in the community, I would add, and yet last year, only 110, under 10%, were removed. So yes, the removal of FNOs, foreign national offenders, to countries in Eastern Europe are going well, and I commend the government for that. But when it comes to removing foreign criminals to countries outside Europe, like Jamaica, Iraq, Nigeria and Somalia, the figures are very, very low. And the reasons for that are some of the ones the Home Secretary touched on earlier. So anyway, I do take exception with some of the Home Secretary's high-fiving at the beginning of her speech. Let me touch now, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the proposal for so-called safe and legal routes or refugee sponsorship. Now, these numbers would be additional to the asylum claims we're already processing. Last year saw the highest number of asylum claims in history. I think from memory it was somewhere in the region of 109,000. And this current year will only be a little bit less. So to add to that, at a time when we already have record numbers of asylum claims, strikes me as irresponsible. The Home Secretary said there would be a cap, but she didn't specify what the cap would be. I'd be interested to hear it. She also asserted that the people coming in on these routes would not be a burden on the general taxpayer because their sponsor would look after them. But what she neglected to mention was that support only has to last for the first year. Thereafter, potentially the taxpayer will have to pick up the tab. So I must say I do not support the creation of these schemes until we have got illegal immigration and asylum claims down essentially to zero. And in response to the argument that somehow the creation of safe and legal routes will stop small boats, I think that is an absurd argument, because unless you give access to this country to everybody who wants to come, to everybody congregating in northern France waiting to get on a dinghy, just in 1 second, unless you give access to all of those people, the ones who don't come in on the scheme will still try and cross on small boats. So the idea this will stop the boats on its own is frankly absurd. Of course, the giveaway.
To the Shadow Minister for giving way. Does he agree with me that with the rising asylum claims and the rising number of approvals of the said asylum claims, essentially it's acting as a magnet for others and essentially it's amounting to an amnesty for asylum claimants?
Yes, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right. There are many nationalities who cross the English Channel by small boat. For example, Afghan, Iranian, Iraqi, Eritrean and Sudanese, to name just 6 or 7, where the asylum grant rate is well over 90%. In some cases, it is very close to 100%, which means crossing by small boat is tantamount to the automatic right to stay here, even though those illegal immigrants, and they are illegal immigrants, are leaving a safe country, France. They're not fleeing danger, they're in France already. So I do agree it creates a massive pull factor. Yes.
Shadow Minister for giving way. I know he's an intelligent man who thinks a lot about these things. Has he considered for a moment why there are so many refugees globally? Why there are 70 million people without a home to call their own? What the effects of wars, environmental disaster and human rights abuse has on populations around the world? Shouldn't there be an international effort to try to help those people as well as dealing with the problems at home? Will putting up barbed wire all around the world solve the problem or create an even worse situation globally?
Well, I mean, I do agree that the situation in countries like Afghanistan does create large movements of people. That is correct. And fixing those problems at source is clearly the best thing to do. What I don't think will solve the problem is transferring potentially tens of millions of people. He gave the number just then, it was 60 or 70 million. Transferring tens of millions of people into the West, I don't think is the right solution to this problem. Those people who are displaced are probably better helped close to their country of origin. But transporting people en masse into this country, I don't think is the solution to that. Let me finish. When we have got illegal migration under control, by which I mean zero, then I think there is a case for a limited, safe and legal route. But until such time as we do that, I don't think it's reasonable. And by the way, the people who are crossing by small boat are not the most vulnerable. They're not typically women and children. They're not people who are sick and vulnerable. They are mostly young men who are paying people smugglers. And if we were going to choose who to help, it wouldn't be mainly young men who are paying people smugglers. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to just make a little bit of progress. I will give way again, but I want to make a bit of progress. There'll be plenty of other opportunities to come in later. I want to briefly touch on ILR, which is conspicuous by its absence. We heard the policy proposal was announced. It was announced, I think it was last November, but we still don't have we still don't have any of the details laid out. I actually agree with the thrust of the Home Secretary's proposal to increase the period to 10 years, because otherwise a large number of people, about 2 million, who entered in the last 4 or 5 years will get the permanent right to stay, including full right to benefits, including people who came in on skilled worker visas sponsored by, amongst others, kebab shops and fried chicken shops. But I am keen to make sure that the Home Secretary sticks to her previous pledge that these rules would apply to people in the country already, and she does not give in to pressure from her own backbenchers. Let me remind the House what the Home Secretary said to the Institute for Public Policy Research on the 5th of March this year. She says the changes proposed, that is to say the 10-year qualification period, she says, and I quote, "That means applying rule changes to those who are in the UK today but have not yet received settled status." I hope the Home Secretary stands by her commitment, and if she does stand by her commitment, we on this side of the House will vote for it. So she has our support on that. While we're speaking of legal migration, I would also urge the Home Secretary to reconsider her plan to introduce remote language tests. They are open to enormous fraud and abuse. Australia and Canada rejected remote language testing for that reason, and some domestic professional bodies, including the Association of Chartered and Certified Accountants, have stopped doing remote testing because it is so open to fraud. I would just ask, I know it's more efficient, I know it'll save money, but it is massively open to fraud. Now let me come to the commitment the Home Secretary made on Shabir Ahmed, the vile gang rapist who should be deported back to Pakistan. We support the amendment to Section 7 of the Immigration Act 1971. Section 33 of the Borders Act, I think it's Section 1, subsection 3, might need some attention as well, but we certainly support that. All I would ask is that the Home Secretary does it rather than by amendment to this bill, which will take probably a year or so to reach the statute books, consider instead doing it by emergency legislation in September, which could be done in a couple of weeks, like the Terrorist Offenders Restriction of Early Release bill that we took through Parliament in, I think it was 15 days in February 2020. There is not a moment to lose, and this can quite quickly be fixed. Madam Deputy Speaker, on the substance of this bill, I agree with some of the Home Secretary's analyses on where the problems lie. The Home Secretary is quite right to say that the immigration appeal system, modern slavery laws and human rights laws are being abused on an industrial scale by foreign criminals and also by people with no legal right to be here, including people who came here illegally by small boat. These illegal immigrants and foreign criminals do make repeated claims, time after time after time. She mentioned an example of a foreign criminal he took 4 years to deport. There was the case I was aware of a Somali man who entered the country illegally, participated in the violent gang rape of a 16-year-old girl, and upon his release from prison, it took 8 years to deport that man back to Somalia because he made 2 or 3 different human rights claims on sometimes contradictory grounds. I think 2 modern slavery claims and a number of human rights claims as well. There have been cases where foreign criminals have avoided being deported, for example, in one case back to Nigeria as an armed robber on the grounds his mental health needs would not be perfectly taken care of in Nigeria. Another man, a drug dealer, wasn't sent back to Iraq, again on ECHR human rights grounds, because apparently he'd become, quotes, too westernised. Not a single thought for the safety of British children to be protected from paedophiles. There's another case of a Zimbabwean paedophile who didn't get deported back to Zimbabwe because he might get treated with hostility back in Zimbabwe. The judge gave no thought to protecting British children at all. No thought protecting our citizens from criminals. There was one case where a man was taken off a charter flight to Jamaica, again on human rights grounds, I think it was Article 8, and about 6 months after being removed from that charter flight to return him to Jamaica, he murdered someone on the streets of South London. A murder committed because of the supposed human rights of a criminal who went on to commit murder. So I agree with the analysis that our immigration legal system, our modern slavery system and the human rights system is being abused on an industrial scale, and it has to end. Let me just turn to some of the specifics the Home Secretary has put in this bill. I think what these measures amount to, whether it's the changes to the immigration tribunal system, modern slavery, or trying to better define Article 8, they represent, I would say, small steps in the right direction. But the truth is, on their own, they are not going to work. Previous governments have attempted to make this work, and it has essentially failed, and I think it will fail again. So, for example, attempts to better define Article 8 in domestic law. That was attempted by, I think from memory, it was Section 19 of the Immigration Act 2014, which I think created Section 117 of the 2002 Act. That was an attempt to do, broadly speaking, what the Home Secretary is trying to do now, and it didn't work, because judges, not just in Strasbourg, but our domestic judges here, empowered by the Human Rights Act, simply continued interpreting family rights very expansively and allowing foreign criminals to stay. So I admire her effort to do this, but it's been tried before and it didn't work. Similarly, with trying to exclude modern slavery claims by foreign criminals. I mean, this has been attempted before. In fact, the legislation before us today it essentially seeks to amend Section 63 of the Nationality and Borders Act, which was an attempt by a previous government to fix this problem 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been repeatedly struck down by the courts. So because of the ECHR and the way it's incorporated by the Human Rights Act, it doesn't matter how we legislate. In Section 63 a few years ago, and the Home Secretary's most recent attempt today, judges will use the ECHR, empowered by the HRA, to circumvent laws passed by this Parliament. The Home Secretary experienced this herself just last week, didn't you? Didn't the Home Secretary? When her one-in, one-out scheme has been essentially upset by vexatious modern slavery claims, the Home Secretary tried valiantly to fix the loophole in guidance, and last week a court struck it down. So the conclusion I've reached, having suffered in the Home Office in the past, as she is suffering now, trying to fix these issues within the construct of the ECHR and modern slavery legislation, the conclusion I've reached, and the examples the Home Secretary gave really only support this. The only way to fix this is to come out of these institutions entirely. You can't do it by tinkering, as this bill seeks to do. The previous government tried it. I've tried it personally. Her predecessor tried it. She's now trying it again. Let me finish the point. The truth is, tinkering like this doesn't work when you have very expansive rights-based conventions. The only way of fixing this properly is to exit the ECHR entirely, repeal the Human Rights Act entirely, exit the ECHR treaty, that's the modern slavery treaty, and say that people entering the country illegally, particularly from a safe place like France, simply can't claim asylum. That would enable us to legislate in this House without courts effectively circumventing our legislation, as they do on a near-daily basis. It would enable us to deport not just some foreign criminals, but all foreign criminals, and it would enable us to deport, within a week of arrival, anyone entering the country illegally by small boat, back either to their country of origin or a safe third country if we can't deport to their country of origin. That would be a genuine deterrent to these unnecessary crossings. That would give us back control of our borders. And while I do share many of the diagnoses the Home Secretary set out in her speech, I honestly don't think these measures, which are incremental and trying to work within the existing framework, I honestly don't think they'll work. Only radical solutions will actually work. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to move our reasoned amendment. While these are small steps in the right direction, and while I just need to finish, and while I do agree with the diagnoses the Home Secretary very eloquently set out in her speech earlier, the measures she takes simply won't work, and I know that because I've tried taking measures like this myself in the past, like Section 63, and the courts don't let them stand until we come out of the ECHR, until we come out of the ECHR treaty, until we stop illegal immigrants claiming asylum, until we end judicial review of most immigration cases. We won't get control of our borders, and the public will continue to lose trust in mainstream politics. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why I move the opposition's reasoned amendment.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Following the Honourable Lady for Nottingham East, I agree with one word she said, that this bill is a betrayal. It's not a betrayal of the Labour Party, though. It's a betrayal of the British people. Because this bill will fail. Just as the Labour government has been promising for 2 years now that it will smash the gangs and stop the boats, it has failed. They all laugh. They're all laughing at the British people who are furious with this Labour government. This government has failed, the last Tory government failed because they've been lying to the British. I'll get to that. I will get to that. Why will it fail? Why is this bill a total and utter farce? Because of the European Convention on Human Rights, and Reform UK have tabled a reasoned amendment opposing this bill because it does not do what is needed. It does not take the United Kingdom out of the ECHR. That is what we need to do if we have to stop the boats. I won't because I don't have any time. Let's just go through this. Part 1, the Independent Immigration Appeals Authority. That will get ripped to shreds by Article 6, claims in the High Court saying that doesn't offer a right to a fair trial. Part 2, Article 8 reform. That will get destroyed by Article 8 claims in the High Court and will probably get overturned by Strasbourg. Part 3, protection status and asylum. Article 3, the right against torture and inhumane degrading treatment. That will block the operation of Part 3. This bill is not fit for purpose and it will let the British people down. I will actually give way to the gentleman at the front.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So she advocates leaving the ECHR. Now, I'm assuming this is after a process of analysis. So could she tell the House 2 good things that the ECHR does for British citizens?
It is after a process of analysis. 10 years as a barrister, 5 of which were spent defending the Home Office in the immigration tribunals. Time as Attorney General, finding and seeing how the ECHR thwarted government decision-making time and time again, whether it was eco-protesters and using Article 10 and 11. And then as Home Secretary in 2022. That is why in 2022 I was the first Conservative minister to say publicly that if we wanted to stop the boats, we needed to leave the ECHR. For that, I was attacked by my former Conservative colleagues, including the current leader of the Conservative Party, including many members of the shadow cabinet, many of whom today, still privately, oppose leaving the ECHR, and they did it publicly 4 years ago. I'm very glad that it's taken the Conservative Party 3 years to catch up with me, but it's 3 years too late and too little. Because when they had the power, when they had the mandate, and when they had ministers telling them what needed to be done, that we needed to leave the ECHR, they blocked, they attacked, they criticised, and they vilified people like me. So I won't take any lections from the Conservative Party that cannot be trusted a bit on leaving the ECHR. It is my honourable friend, the member for Clacton, who has been the original advocate for leaving the ECHR. It was him who first raised the alarm about the small boats crisis. It was only thanks to the pressure and the campaigning that he led single-handedly that even forced this place to wake up and take some action. So yes, we need to leave the ECHR. I've set out a plan on how to do so. Published last year. I urge all of you to read it. The Conservative Party copied it about a year later, but it sets out how to leave, why to leave, how to protect civil liberties in doing so, how we can amend the Good Friday Agreement and protect Northern Ireland in doing so, and why it's what the British people deserve if we are going to stop the boats.
Chris Murray.